This episode is brought to you by ZDMS. Okay, guys, physical inventory. Most dealers do it once a year. Some avoid it altogether. And honestly, who can blame them? Closing the store for days, paying staff to count parts, and still ending up with inaccurate data, it's a painful process that costs time and money. ZDMS changes that. With RFID physical inventory, 1 or 2 employees can complete a full store count in a single evening. No closing, no disruption, just pull the trigger on a handheld scanner and walk the floor. No line of sight required, no climbing shelves, no bending under counters, just fast, accurate counts feeding directly into your ZDMS system. And because it runs inside ZDMS's perpetual inventory system, your data is always current. That means better analytics, less obsolescence, and fewer lost sales. This is the technology Powersports dealers needed, and ZDMS is the only DMS in the industry to build it. Talk to your ZDMS rep today, or to learn more, visit zdms.com/fixit. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to this latest episode of the Dealership Fix-It podcast. My name is Jacob, and today I'm sitting with Fran O'Hagan. He is the founder and CEO of Pied Piper Management Company, and he's spent years inside the dealership on the automotive side, helping improve dealers sell and retain customers before he built the Pied Piper ground up from 2003. Now, for the past 15 years, this team has run the most comprehensive web lead response study in the powersports industry, and the findings have been consistent. Dealers are leaving some serious money on the table. So we're going to talk today about the 2026 Internet Lead Effectiveness, or the ILE study that he just dropped. And just want to say hi, Fran. Thanks for coming on.
Hey, it's my pleasure. Good to join you again.
Yeah. We did our last recording in October of 2023, and there are some very stark realities that we have to face here. It seems like a lot of this stuff has gone unchanged, and you just dropped this in the publications within the industry, and the headline is, it's hard to ignore. 5 straight years of stagnant performance. More than half of all the web leads go unanswered with any kind of personal response, and the dealers who do get it, they're selling 50% more unit sales from the same types of leads. So let's kind of break down a little bit of what the data shows. Let's talk about a little bit of what your findings are, but let's just kind of reintroduce you to the audience if they're not familiar who you are. You've been running this study since 2011. When you really look back at the 15 years worth of data, what has genuinely improved and what has kind of stayed broken in that time frame? What does it tell you about the dealer and the culture?
So clearly, the auto dealers are different animals than powersports dealers. But if you think about how a dealership responds when a customer reaches out to the dealer through the dealer website, a lot of those behaviors have to be the same. If you visit a successful car dealership, they will have maybe 4, 5, 6, 10 people dedicated just to responding to internet leads. And if you visit most powersports dealerships, there isn't anybody like that. It's the management and the employees who handle the response. So we all get it. We all get it that at in powersports, especially today, your hair's on fire, you're busy. If something's out of sight, out of mind, it runs the risk of being ignored. And unfortunately, that's exactly what happens to half of the customers today when they reach out to these powersports dealerships. There are definitely fixes. They're not complicated, that it can be implemented. If you think of powersports back in 2011, nobody was thinking about this part of the business. No one. Zero.
I was.
And well, there you go. But I'm talking about OEMs or dealerships in general.
For sure.
And I know that because we, Pied Piper, worked with many of the OEMs even back then, but not dealing with web response. And when we first started measuring it in 2011 and showed it to the OEMs and said, hey, this is what's happening when customers try to contact your dealers, nobody was interested. But just before COVID, And certainly after COVID, that changed. There were some OEM brands that started to pay a lot of attention to what was happening. And some of those brands improved the average responsiveness of their entire dealer network dramatically. One great example is the Polaris off-road dealers, because if you think about it, that's 1,400 dealers. Some of those are the smallest mom and pops, I'll say with love in my heart. And the other ones are the most sophisticated power sports dealers there are. So 1,400 dealers. Polaris got that entire network to go from basically not responding at all to performing like a typical car brand in about 2 years. And there were some other brands that did the same thing. They focused a lot of energy on it right after COVID. But hey, what have you done for me lately? Because if you look at the past 5 years, the performance has been flat. Some brands have actually gone backward.
I see that. Yeah. And let's kind of talk about the numbers here. So, only 47% of the dealers answer a web customer's question by email or text. That number has actually gotten worse in 2020. Since 2022. Only 13% of dealers offer an appointment. Only 50% of dealers even bother to call the web customer by phone. And it was a questionnaire that you had in the 2026 study in the fourth year in a row, with an average ILE score of 55 out of 100. And that's over a data sample of over 2,100 dealers that you mystery shop. Can you tell us a little bit more about kind of what the process is on when you have your people doing these mystery shops? Because they are live humans, I'm
They
assuming.
are.
They are submitting leads and they're randomly going through manufacturer by manufacturer, and they're submitting leads on those new units at random dealers. What is the kind of process? How does it work, basically?
Gotcha. So by the way, if you come and visit us in Monterey, you can visit the human beings sitting in front of computers acting just like a customer. And that really is the key. They do exactly, and I mean exactly the same thing that a customer would do. They do a Google search, Seattle Harley Davidson dealership website comes up. They click on the site. They go to the vehicle page, find a vehicle in inventory, click on it, and follow whatever directions they're given to ask a question about it. And the questions vary over time. We change it up, but it's questions that a customer would ask. And importantly, this dealership has never seen this customer before, and we use these identities once. So it's a new name, it's a new local cell phone number, a new email address, asking a question, and then what happens?
Nothing.
Yeah, it's too often.
Nothing half the time, according to the data here. So let's kind of jump into that. When you are asking these questions, you're probably asking, what is the availability, maybe some
Yes.
financing offers, some rebates. Like what types of questions specifically would they be asking on these vehicles?
So we don't typically ask about price. We have clients who pay us to do ILE evaluations, and they can ask us to do whatever they want. And sometimes it is price, but typically we don't ask price only because many dealerships will send an auto response. And if they list a price in the auto response, yes, we answered the question. But that's not really measuring, did they actually read the lead and respond to it personally? So we tend to ask things that a human is going to have to read and respond to. Gave a great example, Jacob, which is, I'm interested in this bike. Is it available for me to come and see it?
And the response has, if there is a response, which happens less than half the time, that question is what you're saying is going unanswered, correct?
That's exactly right.
Okay. So they're not even reading the lead. They're just kind of sending maybe canned or templated emails from their CRM, if they even have one. Most of the time it's an auto response, usually from their website provider, that says, we got your lead. Someone will be in contact. and then it's basically crickets from there within the first 24 hours, correct?
That's exactly right.
What do you think it is that this has been this way for 4 years and not really has improved with this type of responsiveness from the dealership? You mentioned their hair's on fire, they're doing a million different things. You gave a little bit of a contrast between automotive having people at the helm. What is it about power sports specifically, do you think, that we cannot figure it out?
I would tell you it's two things. I would tell you the first, oh, and by the way, these aren't complicated. These are two things I'm going to tell you that are reasonably easy to fix. And not only are they reasonably easy to fix, but we said before, if you do a good job responding to these leads, you sell 50% more units to the same quantity of web customers. So hugely worth it, huge ROI. These are the two things. The first is leadership at the dealership has to commit to responding at least once a day to every single web customer, no exceptions, 100% of the time. And if you just stop and you think about it, a power sports dealership doesn't run the risk of everybody leaving without locking up the front door. There's always somebody that's going to lock up the front door. It might be the GM or it might be somebody else, but if the GM can't do it, they're going to delegate to somebody who can. And 100% of the time, they lock the front door. It needs to be the same. But what we say is, don't go home at the end of the day with digital customers still wandering around your store any more so than you would go home at the end of the day with a physical customer still wandering around your store. Respond once a day. That is the ante. That's the bare minimum. You can't exist in this industry if you don't do that. So that's the first step. Management and staff that buy into it, we are going to respond at least once a day. Now, if you ask me, hey, is it worthwhile to try to do it quicker? Oh, yeah, absolutely. But let's start with once a day because we know half the time that isn't even happening today. So that's the first step. The second step, and Jacob, your question, why is this a problem? Part of the reason it's a problem is dashboards and reports that say, I'm doing fine. We respond to 98.6% of our leads within the first 15 minutes. Now, the problem is that is not taking into account, is it an autoresponder or a salesperson template, or did you really read the lead and respond to the customer's question? And the other part is, oftentimes they're measuring only web response or only web and text and not what happened on the phone. Did they call? Did they leave a message? More often than not, it's going to be a message. And we know from having done this for years and years and years that as a dealership, if you rely on one path, if you only call or you only email or you only text, you miss about a third of your customers. You have to do multiple paths. There's no way around it. Because if you call a customer, they don't know the number, they don't answer it, goes into voicemail, they never check the voicemail. Or if it's email, it gets lost in spam, or they just don't check their emails. Or some people, I mean, I'm sure you know plenty, get barraged now with text. They get 200 texts in a day. So you have to do multiple paths. So those really are the keys. The second one is you need something like ILE. Hey, if you find an alternative, that's cool too. But what ILE does is measure what the customers are really experiencing with responses by phone, by email, by text, also the chat experience. And you think of these ILE, think of our ILE reporting as your conscience reaching out and tapping you on the shoulder and saying, hey, remember this invisible part of the business? It's important for you to be paying attention to this too. And this is what's happening. And we make it so dead simple. One of the things that I've certainly learned is if your product offerings aren't absolutely simple, they'll fail. So what we do today, we text a 90-second audio summary directly to dealership management. So they get their phone, they get a text from us, They can listen to this 90-second audio summary of what happened. It'll tell them what's up, what were the problems, what went well, and right in the same location, they can access what we've called Piper Answers, which is our interactive chat. And it will give, if they want to know, hey, what can we do to improve? Or how does this compare to how we've been doing for the last 6 months? Or how do other dealerships selling the same brand, what do they do that's better than what we're doing? Can ask all of those questions. No report, no dashboard, no complicated, requirements, hoops to jump through. It's dead simple.
Like that. Yeah. Let's double click on your first tip there just for a moment, because I'm recalling when we first talked about this almost 3 years now, 2.5 years ago. You said the same exact thing. Respond one time per day before you go home at night, no exceptions. And that has to be from the leadership down. What is your opinion on some of the available CRM systems that are in our industry? And there's a dozen of them that you can choose from. Some in the automotive space can play in the power sports industry as well. But the organizational software, the customer relationship management tool, CRM, how important is that to be able to do these things that you're talking about and have a well written or assisted templated, if you will, response that answers the question and it reports all these things? You mentioned dashboards. Maybe it can be a little confusing, but what is your opinion just specifically on the CRM within the dealership?
Sure. So, first of all, I'm a fan of CRM, but I need to share a story. Um, Before COVID, an OEM hired us to do some snooping around with for stats for them, and we Piper have access to behavioral data for most of the power sports industry, and there was a website provider that had their own data for about 60% of the industry, and without paying any attention to names or anything else, just looking at the math, it allowed us to look at what were the behavioral differences in the power sports industry between dealers who used CRM. In other words, this website provider was sending leads to a CRM, and dealerships that didn't use any CRM. They used the minimalist back end that was part of the website, and it made no difference. It was all
Really?
about process. It was all about dealership commitment and process, with one exception. There was one CRM provider that is a car CRM provider, and its performance was better. And of course, we looked at that and said, okay, I get it. That's some management at the dealership is familiar with this car CRM. So I'm sure they're holding their store accountable to, a higher standard. But other than that, the fact that a dealership had a CRM didn't make their behaviors any better. So that's a long way of saying, like what I said before, this is actually really simple. It's just commitment. And I don't care whether you're using Outlook to respond instead of using a fancy CRM system. You just have to be vigilant and relentless about it. Once a day, no exceptions.
That's so interesting that you say that, because I'm a huge advocate of CRMs, and I know you said you're a fan too, but the CRM is designed to be a all day software that the person responsible for answering these web leads would look and go to and manage this pile of leads that they are getting, not only from the first day that they are put into the CRM from your web provider, but also to manage the follow up in the after, right? The post day, right? And so I'm really like shocked that you would say that, because whether they're using a CRM or not, it makes no difference as long as they just respond, period. I get that, but I would have to push back a little bit and say the CRM probably helps a little bit in just kind of keeping these things organized. That's
So,
incredible.
so this was 2018.
Okay.
Um, and to be fair, if you have AI enabled CRM, there's some simple inquiries that can be responded to. And by the way, this is a topic that we are all over with the car guys, because the car guys have AI enabled this and AI enabled that, and it's been fascinating. The bottom line is if you are a dealership without good processes and without a staff that follows the processes, if you think that you're going to get some technological solution, AI, that is going to fix everything, you're wrong. It absolutely will not. And it will infuriate your customers. It's sort of the same, it's the 2026 version of the phone tree. You're calling your
Yeah.
credit card company, or today it's calling your car dealership to schedule service. And I want I need an oil change, but I have this recall notice. So is it going to take 5 minutes, or should I plan to leave it there and get a ride home? And the AI, 10 minutes later, after interacting with the AI tells you, I can't help you. I'll get a human. But then the problem is there's no human available because all the service managers or service advisors uh, believe, oh, the AI can handle it. I don't need to answer my phone.
Well,
So
you mentioned AI in your post, and I do want to get to that a little bit later. So let's get to that in just a few minutes here. Let's keep on this non-replying, this replying within 24 hours, CRM, no CRM. Let's kind of talk about for the dealers that do reply. Fran, you're saying that only 13% offer an appointment with a specific date and time. I mean, that's kind of just shocking to me, right? What is the other 87% not doing? Right? What's stopping them from doing this?
so before COVID, that percentage was virtually zero. So 13% is much higher than it used to be. I remember an OEM, the number for that OEM was zero, and they set as a target to increase it, and they did. They did increase it. But no, you're absolutely right. Uh, that is the next step for the customer. We want the customers asking about coming in many cases. We want to do everything we can to help them with that.
Do you think that this is just a lack of training or scripting rather? Hey, Mr. Customer, I saw that you had this question. Here's my answer to it. What day works best for you, tomorrow or Thursday afternoon? Is it just something like that, or they're just flat out not asking if they're going to be coming in?
So, you know, I think two points here. I think of this partly. I don't know if you know any EMTs. But, if you're an EMT, you have to figure out what to address first when you run across an injured person, and like triage. So gaping flesh wound needs attention right away. Dislocated little finger, that can wait until after we take care of the gaping flesh wound. That's the
Yep.
way I think of the power sports industry. So if 50% of the time the customers are getting nothing, crickets, that is the gaping flesh wound. But
Yes.
to my second point, we internally think of dealers as in power sports as being in one of three categories. There's the group that don't respond, and they are the ones to whom we say respond once a day. They're the group that already respond quickly, and they're the ones, Jacob, to your point, who need to improve the behaviors. So they're the ones that need to make sure that they offer an appointment, just as an example. And they're the ones who need to make sure they're responding in 15 minutes and through multiple paths. That that's basically what the car dealers do. So believe it or not, there are plenty of power sports dealers who do just as well as any car dealership. And they're the ones where if we measure them and they're not offering an appointment, that's what they're going to work on. So the ones that don't respond, ones who do a really good job, they basically act like the car dealers. And then the middle ones are the dealerships that do respond once a day. They're the ones where we say, do it faster. So the speed is way more important than the quality when it comes to if you're asking, "Hey, what should I do next?" I do respond once a day. What should I do next? Well, try to respond within an hour. Try to respond within 30 minutes. And I hereby give you dispensation. You don't have to do it every time. I get it. You're busy. So sometimes you won't be able to do that, but at least try to know that it's worth it.
Yeah,
If we plot web lead close rates with time to respond, that's almost a one-to-one relationship. And beyond 24 hours, it almost doesn't even matter that you respond.
it's
The
gone.
customer
Yeah.
Yeah, the customer has probably found somebody else who's much more eager to sell them a bike or a side-by-side.
I think it was Mark Sheffield that said when it comes to responding to internet leads, you only have to be as bad as the rest of the dealers to be a little bit better, right? So it's kind of a funny analogy that he's saying, but
It
it's
is.
like we all suck, and all you have to do is just 1% better than the average to win a lot more deals than your competitor.
That's it.
Um, let's double click on the piece where you said multiple paths. I am in full agreement with any means necessary, communicating with the customer on multiple platforms. You mentioned email is probably the easiest. Text is really relevant right now with how we communicate just as people, period, never mind a business to a consumer. Smoke signals, you put a flag in the air, you deliver a mail piece to their door, however you got to communicate with them. But the phone, you're saying in your latest report that half of the dealers are still not picking up the phone, when we know for a fact that the phone response drives the conversions the best. Why do you think this is still happening? And what does that say about how dealers think about web leads versus the floor traffic and talking to them on the phone?
Um, Being uncomfortable as a salesperson, being uncomfortable with it, being lazy, um, not understanding, saying, I've composed this email. I mean, the interesting thing is sometimes you run into people who are equally at home composing emails and texts and talking on the phone, but it's also possible to run into somebody that doesn't like talking on the phone. Um, that's no excuse. You have to do it. Highest close rate comes from phone interaction. Interesting stats from the car guys. If a customer reaches out to you first on the phone, the close rate's double what it is through web. And if they show up at your door, it's double what it is on the phone.
I agree. I agree. I've been saying it for years. The incoming phone call, the customer calling your dealership, is the hottest lead you'll ever face, but it's often the most mishandled because of just not being ready to have that conversation, or you're just not prepared enough to speak. A lot of people are not very good at the verbal command anymore. I'd argue myself included, but regardless, you have to have that willingness to have that conversation on the phone, because you have a whole bunch of different tools at your disposal, like influx and excitement and tone, right? You don't have any of that through an email or a text message.
You're
And so the phone call
100%
is,
correct.
it's so important to have these people pick up the phones and call them before they send an email or a text. It's kind of crazy. Okay, so not a lot has changed in 3 straight years. The industry average, it has sat at a 44 out of 100. Fran, is this just complacency? Is it a staffing problem? Is it a systems problem, or is it something else entirely?
I think for many dealers, they've been misled, and it's not unique to power sports. If you get a dashboard that tells you we've responded to this many leads, me as a general manager, my life doesn't rise and fall only on leads. I'm worried about all kinds of other stuff. So if I see a report that says I'm doing fine, why should I dig any deeper? But what we know is it's
Mm.
completely misleading. It says, yes, you responded to this lead when in fact it was an auto response. And by the way, you did make a phone call, and the report doesn't say anything about that.
It doesn't have any like tracking tied to it, or a summary, or something
Right.
about what the conversation was, or even if they left a message.
That's exactly right. Whereas
Okay.
the ILE evaluations, reaching out and tapping them on the shoulder and saying, hey, remember this part of the business? This is what's really happening. One of my colleagues came up with the term, it's a flashlight shining on the roaches. You don't need to tell somebody roaches are bad or this is how you get rid of them. All you need to be is the flashlight showing them that they have them.
That makes a lot of sense. This is kind of how I started in my sales career was on the phone through the business development center, the BDC, and ran some internet departments back in the day. And it was always a super important part to be timely, right? Within business hours, you're calling them within 15 minutes, but certainly under an hour. And I know that for some of the people that I managed under my internet department, because we had a big multi-person business development center, that sometimes those metrics were gamified
Sure.
because that's how we looked at them. Do you think that there's when you're saying they're being misled, some of it is the reporting showing auto responses, but could it also be their own people that are just hitting a response button just so it stops the clock, quote unquote, and it
Without
shows
question.
without
Without
question. Okay,
question.
it's
Yeah.
still happening.
Yep.
That's incredible. Okay.
And still happening in the car world too.
Still happening in the car world. Yeah. I think I found when I was looking into this a long, long time ago is that it's because a lot of the pay plans were tied to holding a average response time. Do you think that might play into it? I mean, if that's what your goal is, that you're chasing to be paid,
Well,
as part of your comp.
or it's the OEM having a requirement tied
That
to
too.
God knows what back end money. So yeah,
That too. Yeah. And it sours the customer experience if they don't get a response timely. And if they even do get one, it's canned and templated and auto responded. Kind of crazy. Okay. Well, let's talk about the good side of it, right? So, we just kind of went over all of the things that dealers may be doing wrong. And if you're listening to this and you are a dealer, take it from Fran, take it from me. There's a lot of little issues that you got to put a microscope on and say, am I doing at least the bare minimum? And if I am, how do I improve that? How do I get my response time shorter? How do I do my follow up correctly? Are my people asking for an appointment? But let's talk about Indian now. So Indian
sure.
Motorcycle, fantastic brand. They've held the top spot for 4 years in a row. What is it about the specific behaviors in an Indian dealership, from the rest of the industry? What are they actually doing that other brands are not?
Sure. So I would say two things. I would say the first is if you talk with any of the Indian management or the reps who call in the dealers and you discuss web response, is it important? Do you have an opinion about it? Do you care what we do? They care very much. It's part of the business they pay close attention to. There's no question they care about it. And they measure it. They provide ongoing ILE evaluations directly to the dealers. So the dealers see what the customers are experiencing, and they've been doing that for years.
Now, just as a close second, we have Harley Davidson, right? So just the comparison, I'm not breaking any rules in saying that these are two very much competing brands. They only
Sure,
sell on-road motorcycle. They're classic Americana V twin. Uh, you know, they're all of the Harley Davidson dealerships are standalone for the most part, while Indian can have a mixture of standalone and in a multi OEM franchised store. Is it along the same lines with Harley Davidson? Are they just more involved? Do they get less leads, and that allows them to be a little bit more on it? What do you think that relationship there is with those two manufacturers specifically?
sure. So pre-COVID, the Harley Davidson dealerships performed pretty similarly to the rest of the power sports industry, which is to say customers really wouldn't get a response to their inquiry. Actually, interestingly, even back then, the Harley Davidson dealers were better at calling, but they still would only call a subset of the customers. So really, arguably, they were similar to the rest of the industry. They also began an ILE program where they provide 2 ILE reports to each dealer every month, and it drove dramatic and quick improvement to the point where Harley Davidson scored a 60 on the 0 to 100 ILE scale, and that also would place them as a typical car dealer. The Harley dealers were acting like a typical car dealer. But then, of course, life and times of Harley Davidson and their dealers over the past few years hasn't been real easy, and they discontinued that, program, and their performance has dropped off somewhat, but they still are up near the top of the powersports industry.
That's interesting, yeah. And you mentioned they only call a subset of their customers. You and I both know that not every lead any dealership would get, let alone a Harley or Indian store, they don't always get a phone number in that lead, right? So your only
Absolutely.
option is to email. And, if we're looking at the stats, half of them aren't doing that either, right? So you were really limited into what type and how and quickly we respond to the customers, given we only have one way to do it. All right. So back to the Indians' consistency here. You mentioned the ILE reporting as a key factor. Can you kind of unpack a little bit more on, you know, how does making the invisible visible actually change their dealer behavior, right? You mentioned a couple things of how Indian dealerships are doing it differently, but how can we put that on the non-Indian dealerships and get them to do this better?
So, if it was 10 years ago, there w and we talked about web response in the power sports industry, there would still be dealers back then that would kind of, roll their eyes and say, "This isn't really all that important." Um, those days are so completely gone. You just don't really find anybody like that anymore. And what we see is driving improvement doesn't really come from training. They know what they're supposed to be doing. It comes from showing them what's really happening. Again, it's the flashlight and roaches example where they just didn't know they had roaches. And if you think about what happens at retail, again, your hair's on fire. The stuff that is visible gets taken care of, and the stuff that's invisible does not. And the web response part of the business, or I would also argue what happens when a customer calls, it's invisible for the most part. Whereas in contrast, if I'm a general manager and I look around my store and I see salespeople goofing off while customers are wandering around, I'm going to take care of that immediately.
Yeah.
So it's not so much
Yeah.
telling them how to change, it's just letting them know what really is happening.
It's crazy. I I remember getting these reports back in the day and being like almost like pissed, right? And I don't know how many conversations you've had with managers, general managers, or some of the leadership type roles in the OEMs that you work with when they see kind of the failures that their store is putting out there in the world. And this is only one mystery shopped web lead. And assume that it's happening on all of your web leads that are coming through. We're talking hundreds per month. I mean, how angry has a manager gotten at you because of their shortcomings when they do receive this report from Pied Piper?
So back when Pied Piper did a lot more of in-person mystery shopping, people would be pissed off all the time because you figure you're using a fake customer as a actor and, measurer of what's happening in a store. And a lot of times there can be disagreement about, hey, what happened? We just don't see that when it comes to measuring web response. As when it's measuring web response, it's dead simple. There's nothing that we can do to tilt the equation. It really is 100% about what the dealership does. And like I said, nobody disputes the importance of this today. Everybody gets it. So that doesn't happen a whole lot. And the other thing is Pied Piper has become very, very good at what we do. You figure we've been doing web response for 15 years. We know what we're doing. And like I said, if you come to Monterey, you can come and visit the human beings that are actually doing these evaluations.
I like that you do that. You said that twice now. So a dealer can, if they're in the Monterey area, come and visit. They can see how this thing works. They can see the types of people that are there making these inquiries at the different dealerships, how they report it, how they react. Yeah, I like that. That's cool. That leaves a lot of transparency open for you guys. All right. So let's talk about the AI part of it, because that was part of your article there. And I do want to touch base on it because it's everywhere now. It's in our CRMs, it's on our computers, it's on our phones. We have this huge unlocked resource that is a brilliant mastermind sitting in our hands at any given time. But you specifically called out the AI tools in your post as a false fix. You have your son Eric leading AI and ML at the Pied Piper. How do you square those two things up? What is the AI actually good for here versus what it can actually replace?
This is a great topic. So, what I would tell you is if there's a company that's jumping up and down, crowing about AI, watch out. On the other hand, if there's a company that knows how to use AI behind the scenes to make life easier for their clients, now that's a good thing. And that's exactly what we do. We use all kinds of AI behind the scenes to make life easier for our clients. Like, for example, when I mentioned with an ILE evaluation, the way those are delivered, a general manager gets a text and listens to a 90-second summary that describes what happened. That's all generated by AI. But if it wasn't generated by AI, it would be generated by smart human beings doing the same thing. So in other words, it's a process. If I think about it from a dealer perspective, there are aspects of AI, and specifically as it relates to web response, there are aspects of AI that can be hugely helpful, but there's a big risk. And like I said, we've been living this for the past 2 years in the auto industry. The auto industry has been going down this path. They're a little bit ahead. And if you don't have strong leadership, commitment, and strong processes, AI is not going to make your life easier. It's going to cause some big problems. You need to first have the commitment and the processes and then layer that on, layer AI on. If you do it that way, just coming up with an example for you, there's some things that AI is not good at answering. And when your system runs into one of those customers, there needs to be a efficient path for a human to respond to it. If you're not careful, what'll happen is what happened 15 or 20 years ago with autoresponders and salespeople saying, "Oh, the autoresponders are going out. I don't have to actually read any of these leads." So the risk is that you go down that same path with AI. If you, on the other hand, if you have strong leadership, strong commitment, you buy into responding once a day at a minimum. Yeah, you have measurement showing what's actually happening, and you use AI to answer easy questions, then that can definitely be a positive. I would tell you that so the car guys have doubled the percentage of perfect responses in 5 years. I would tell you that probably a third to a half of that improvement was driven by AI. But
Just to help
the
just
ju-
just to help improve the context of the messaging is what you're saying? It's help improve that?
well, it's hard for some dealerships. It's hard to respond perfectly within 15 minutes to every single lead. But if you have AI handling some of that load, it can make it a lot easier for you. The challenge is the handoffs. So if AI has to hand off to a human, like in the car world, if AI has to hand off to a human, there's twice as likely the customers are twice as likely to get no response. And interestingly, if AI does not have to hand off to a human, the performance is better than the typical human in the car world. But
That's
yes,
interesting.
the handoffs, the AI to human handoffs, I'll give you an example. Um, I contact a Harley dealer and I say, I see you have this Street Glide. I have a a BMW touring bike that I'm interested in trading in. Um, can you make that happen? Well, the AI can give me an answer, but they can't really give me the answer I'm looking for. I'm looking for the truth, the facts.
Okay.
And the AI may say, yeah, come on in and check it out. And have no idea whether you can, I mean, you're going to offer me $2,000 below wholesale for my BMW. Or alternatively, maybe that's a bike that you can actually sell. And a human could walk over to the sales manager and figure that out and be able to respond. So anyway, that needs to be handed off to a human. And then the other part that we see is anytime you have multiple technologies handshaking with each other, things break. Things break all the time.
Yeah.
If you consider what we do with ILE, we see that we have a front row seat. We see that all the time. So you have to be sure. I can't be some black box that you think is working, but you discover that for the past 3 weeks, customers have been getting nothing.
Mm, I see. So yeah, it's not even sending anything out, right? You think it is, but it's not.
Exactly. It may not be
Okay.
communicating with the email client, or it may not be communicating with your software that sends out texts, or whatever it is. And that
Yeah,
happens all the time. One
that's a
one
great point.
minor change in one piece of your technology all of a sudden can come, cause everything to grind to a halt if you're not
That's
watching
a
what the
great point.
customers are really experiencing.
What do you think in terms of AI as a follow up, right? So n- let's just be blunt. The industry sits and hovers around a 12 to 15% close rate, right? So what do we do with the other, 85% of non-buyers in that time frame? Do we unleash AI on them, try to get some engagement through email or text and do some follow-up systems from there? And then once somebody engages again, it kind of bubbles back up to the surface and lets a human take over. What's your opinion on AI in that term?
So I have two different thoughts. The first is that if you actually track sales based on response time, if you think that creating beautiful outreach on day 3, 5, 10, 3 weeks, whatever it is going to generate a whole lot of sales for you, in our experience, it does not. Responding quickly does. But the other use for what you're describing that I completely buy into is reaching out to your existing customers, reaching out to the customers you know. So, Jacob, you know that I've been an extremely good retail motorcycle customer over the years. I've bought dozens and dozens and dozens of motorcycles, and I'm a laydown. I'm the easiest customer to sell to. Uh, I just bought a side by side from Mark Sheffield's dealership here in Texas, and they gave me a price, and I said, "Sure." Uh, if you think about what I just said, wouldn't you expect that my phone would ring off the hook from these dealerships that I've bought dozens and dozens and dozens of Powersports products from? But it never has.
Mm,
And it's not me. It's just the industry that um, I believe mining your existing customers can be much better. I mean, if you think about the something that we in power sports can learn from the car guys, it's the service drive. When bikes are brought in for service, that's a great opportunity for somebody to take an interest in the owner and say, "Hey, did you know that this just came out? Would you like to try this out?"
I love that. Yeah. And I do want to talk about service just before we end our segment here, but let's talk quickly about the context of the communication, right? So follow up or first initial response. Let's talk about the actual email that customers are getting. Do you see any difference in the type of format that wins better? For an example, right? So some of our old email templates used to have these big banners at the top with, high, high quality graphics and
Yeah,
different fonts and a footer and all that stuff. But what I've seen lately is that a lot of dealers are just going to like a plain text,
right.
hello, Fran, thanks
Yeah.
for submitting your inquiry, right? What do you see any type of format working better when it comes to the first response or follow up?
You're asking a great question. So, um, Kia, you know what Kia brand, you could picture it. It's capital K, capital I, capital A. That is salesy, spammy. And Kia had all kinds of trouble getting their email outreach to reach the customers because it was getting blocked
Interesting.
by Google, blocked by Yahoo. Many, it was the same thing. So, there are schools of thought that say, oh, we want to have embedded video and we want to have this and we want to have that. And the if you can figure out how to get it delivered, I think that's brilliant. But if it were O'Hagan Motors, I would probably lean more toward the text because I want to be, first of all, I want to be sure that somebody sees it.
Yeah.
Um, but it's interesting. If you ask the smart dealers today, how important is email today compared to 5, 10, 15 years ago? There's no question it's less important, but it doesn't mean you can ignore it and not use it because some customers consume email in a lasting way. It's almost like brochures used to be, whereas a text is gone. A text, I'm super busy. I get all kinds of texts. I see one show up and then it disappears, and another one shows up from somebody else, and it's gone. Or a phone call, I don't answer those. So yeah, emails are important. But uh, back to your earlier point, again, if it was Jacob and Fran Motors, we would phone every single customer who gives us a phone number without exception,
Right.
100% of the time. And if we could pick, I can only interact by either phone or email or text. What do I pick? 100% phone.
Yep. You're just going to close that many more deals from it. Yeah. Okay, let's talk about the OEM quickly here for a second. The brands at the top of the study, they tend to have some formal measurements or programs in place. Should OEMs be held a little bit more responsible for their dealer network's lead response performance? Like, is this an OEM problem as much as it is a dealer problem? Is there resources that they can help them with? I mean, tell me your opinion on the OEM to the dealer part of it.
I think there is responsibility that the OEMs shoulder. And I mean, it kind of goes beyond that. There are OEMs who are providing reporting to the dealers that tell the dealers they're doing fine, and they're not. When measured by what the customers really experience, what's really happening is different from what the dealers are seeing, and that's a problem.
That's part of
So
your dealers are being misled is some of the reports
exactly,
they're looking at is directly from the OEM.
that's correct.
Okay.
And that used to happen in the auto world, but little bit less nowadays. Yeah, I would say, I mean, just imagine if you're an executive with an OEM and, the board of directors sees a report that says that your dealer network blows off half of the people who reach out to it. Yeah, I'd say that should definitely be a concern for the OEMs.
Okay. Well, there it is, OEMs, right? Okay. And then I did say that we want to talk about the service drive. So 90% of this conversation has been about the sales lead, but we also get a ton of inquiries to the service department. And that can be a whole nother animal. You have a whole nother type of mindset customer, right? When they're pissed, their stuff's not working, they need it fixed or they need it serviced. And it's not somebody that wants to buy something, it's somebody that wants to fix something they already bought. So how does this ILE I'm not sure if you call it a different name, how does this relate to the service department and the advisors that we put on the front lines of touching these customers?
Gotcha. So, yes, ILE or internet lead effectiveness, that's for the sales side, but we do provide something called service scheduling effectiveness. where we measure what happens when customers call and also what happens when they schedule online. In power sports, it's a little less common to schedule online, but online is about half of the service appointments in auto, and we measure both of them. And it, with the car guys, I'd say probably 90% of the service scheduling is leaning toward AI now to chatbots, and they have to face the handoff when a chatbot can't handle the issue. But for power sports, the first step I would say is, does the phone just ring? I mean, I remember I bought a Harley 5 or 6 years ago, uh, and Northern California. Uh, my dealer, the same service advisors who were supposed to be answering the phone and scheduling oil changes, also sold P&A.
Mm,
They sold parts, and their compensation was tied to the volume of chrome stuff they sold to somebody that had a 15-year-old Harley. And meanwhile, you would call to schedule an oil change and the phone would just ring off the hook, or you'd be put on hold for 15 minutes.
yeah.
I guarantee you the owner of that store at the time had no idea that was the unintended consequence of his pay plan and no idea it was happening.
That's incredible. Yeah. Those, those pay plans will really direct the person who you're paying into one direction or another. So just make sure that it's in the right area for sure.
Well said.
Okay, so last question here for you, Fran. Appreciate your time today. I always like to kind of end these things with like a forward-looking statement. What would Fran O'Hagan Motorsports do if he was a dealer? What would we tell other dealers? So if a dealer principal, manager, GM, it doesn't matter really your position in the dealership. If you're listening to this episode right now and they want to actually move the needle before the 2027 study comes out, what are one, two, or three things that they should start right now this week?
Gotcha. So, as we said before, it's not complicated. I mean, this is actually fairly simple to address when we're talking about how you handle your web customers. And while we're at it, let's lump in the phone customers too. But specifically to the web customers, that commitment to respond once a day, that is set by the top person. So if you make that a requirement, the same way that you require that the front door is locked before everybody goes home, that we will respond to every single lead. That's one. And then the second is have a measurement show you what's really happening. You need a flashlight shining on the roaches. Uh, if I show you that you have roaches, I don't need to tell you they're bad. I don't need to tell you how to get rid of them. You already can figure that part out. The
Yep.
value is just knowing that you have those roaches.
I love it. I love it. Yeah. You got an infestation. Let's do something about it. You can either hire an exterminator or go buy some raid and kill them yourself, right?
That's it.
All right, man. Well, Fran, again, thank you. We need to be doing this a little bit more often, is what it sounds like, and ringing the bell here in the power sports industry on, how we talk about solutions to these problems that you're measuring through your company, and just say, hey guys, let's beat this drum until we get it figured out. 4 years now, it's been the same. Indian's been leading the pack. What are those guys doing? Let's look at them and let's try to just improve the customer experience overall. So, Fran, if people needed to get a hold of you, how can they find you?
PiedPiperPSI.com.
PiedPiperPSI.com. All right. Well, his name again is Fran O'Hagan. He's CEO and founder of Pied Piper, doing the Lord's work out there when it comes to shining a light on the cockroaches, he put it. But really, it's about just being more informed as a dealer principal, taking a look at things that maybe you didn't know that you didn't know, right? And hey, maybe I thought I was doing a good job at this. Maybe I'm not. Super interesting reports that he puts out pretty frequently. And we're always talking about how the digital customer is becoming a more important part of the dealership life and retail environment. So, Fran, thank you so much, man. I appreciate your time.
Hey, it's my pleasure.
Awesome. Well, on that note, we'll say bye, everybody.
As many of you know, taking physical inventory is something you do once, maybe twice a year, and sometimes you avoid it altogether. With large quantities of parts, accessories, chemicals, tires, and various other merchandise throughout your store, it's not a simple task to complete. There is a better solution. A solution that gives you the ability to cycle inventory counts anytime without disruption to your business. That solution? ZDMS RFID Physical Inventory. With RFID tags placed on inventory, you can cycle counts or conduct physical inventory with the RFID handheld scanner by simply pulling the trigger and walking around your dealership. RFID scanners do not require line of sight, so counters don't need to bend down under partitions, climb shelves, or position items to be visually seen to be counted in most cases. Contact your ZDMS representative to learn more about RFID physical inventory and how ZDMS is the only dealer management system in the powersports industry building the technology your dealership needs.